Hi, welcome to Hormone Heaven. This is Dr. Angel. I'm a thyroid and perimenopause expert with 15 years experience. This podcast is for women who are struggling with thyroid or perimenopause and are looking for natural solutions. It's a micropod because I like to give quick, bite-sized information that you can implement immediately in your daily life. Please keep in mind, I'm a doctor, but I'm not your doctor, so please check with your healthcare provider before beginning or ending any supplements or medications. Remember to click follow so you can be notified of downloads. Let's get started. Do you feel wired but tired during the day, but wide awake at night? What about unexplained weight gain, temperature fluctuations, or lowered immune function? If you thought these were normal signs of aging, I have good news for you. They are not. These symptoms are common red flags for a syndrome often called adrenal fatigue. Now, the adrenals, they're on top of our kidneys, and they're basically our energy source in our body. They also produce a hormone called cortisol. And quick little note, an unknown fact about the adrenals is they also produce sex hormones as well. So not just cortisol, but we'll be talking about that later. So today we are discussing how the thyroid and the cortisol and how we can optimize our cortisol so that the hormones upstream can be balanced, right? So cortisol is that base hormone and it needs to be balanced before all the rest. And this is known as the hormone hierarchy, or as I like to call it, hormone heaven. Now you can go back to episode 2 to learn more about that hierarchy and how that works. But when you're stressed, your adrenals make a hormone called cortisol. And cortisol helps your body prepare for a stressful situation by giving you more energy. However, too much cortisol can be bad for your body. So we have to have this balance. Now, adrenal fatigue is a syndrome that describes many symptoms commonly associated with high levels of constant stress. It's important to note here that adrenal fatigue is not recognized by medical doctors in conventional medicine. It's not a medical diagnosis. However, it's a very common diagnosis in integrative and functional medicine, alternative health, people like me. When you're stressed for a long time, the hormone cortisol can affect your thyroid gland. This can make it harder for your thyroid gland to work properly and can make your symptoms worse if you're already having a thyroid problem. Now, some doctors refer to adrenal fatigue as adrenal dysfunction, adrenal exhaustion, HPA axis dysfunction. Now, HPA stands for hypothalamus pituitary adrenal. So those are the three things that are involved in all this. The HPA is like the mother center of all the hormone regulation in the body. So I'm probably just going to keep calling it adrenal fatigue. It's easier. Most lay people like us, and well, not me, but other people understand what that means. So we're just going to stick with that. So the primary cause of adrenal fatigue syndrome is chronic high stress paired with a stress response that is not ideal, right? So ideally, we want cortisol levels to peak in the early morning and then decline throughout the day. And they should be the lowest level they are at around midnight, like when you're sleeping, right? But constant stress causes this HPA axis dysfunction and alterations in our cortisol levels throughout the day. And that often leads to like either really low levels in the morning and high levels before you go to the bed, things like that, or high all the time. There's constant things that can be going on with that cortisol. So, working nights or not getting enough sleep during times that you should get sleep can also cause that cortisol levels to shift. So, what are some symptoms? How do you know this is happening to you? Well, like I mentioned earlier, feeling wired and tired. So, you're really kind of awake, you can't go to sleep, but you're also exhausted. So, usually these people are on tons of caffeine to keep them awake during the day. Unfortunately, this creates a cycle because once you start taking in all this caffeine, it actually not injures, but it definitely does not allow the adrenals to work efficiently. Okay. So you have these adrenals not working efficiently. You're adding that caffeine to it. It's making it worse. It's just a cycle you get into. Most people I know see that have this usually will crash mid morning or mid afternoon, sometimes both. But they get a second wind before they go to bed. So then they're up all night doing things because they got to, got to be busy. So feeling wired and tired. Weight gain is another one, particularly in that belly area. Our cortisol loves to hold fat in that belly area. So cortisol levels rise during stress because they want to assist like with fight or flight. So if you have chronic stress or irregular sleep schedules, your adrenals are taking a beating. They're overproducing cortisol because they think you're going into this flight or fight situation. And if you're running, then they're like, oh, we got to hold all this belly fat because you're not going to be able to get any food while you're running, right? Well, our stress these days is not what it used to be. People who are running for animals hundreds of thousands of years ago are not running from them now. So we're getting that belly fat because of that cortisol. Temperature fluctuations. This can actually be cortisol related or it can be hormone related as far as the sex hormones, but body temperatures will fluctuate during times of stress and relaxation. Sleep disturbances. So not only does not getting consistent sleep mess with your cortisol, but cortisol can actually mess with your sleep. So cortisol actually helps regulate sleep patterns and helps the body cope with everyday stress. And we talked about how they're high in the morning and low before you go to bed. But if you're in a constant state of stress or disrupted sleep, then they may stay high all day long. And that can cause sleep pattern problems the next night. It can also mess with your immune function. So, like our cortisol is actually a tamper down of our inflammation response. So, our body gets really inflamed. That cortisol gets in there and it starts tapping that inflammation down. So, our body is not as inflamed. Unfortunately, we can get stuck if we're constantly inflamed. Our cortisol can get stuck in that environment. So, what can you do? Something really easy you can do is take electrolytes every morning. Electrolytes have the base minerals of sodium, potassium, calcium, and magnesium. And sodium is particularly important for cortisol. And the reason is adrenals need sodium first thing in the morning, and they need it more than any other organ of the body. So we're giving those organs sodium first thing in the morning, and we're giving it to them as a foundation of those electrolytes so that our body can really absorb it well because all those minerals work together. Now, if you've been following me any time at all, you know I say all the time minerals are not in our food anymore. Okay. We have farmed minerals out of our food. We're getting very few compared to what we were getting just in 1970. So these electrolytes are helping us get those minerals in the morning to spark plug our hormones and really get us moving. Now, I have been hearing lately that a lot of conventional doctors are recommending people eat ramen to get their sodium. Sodium. I highly disagree with that. So ramen is a processed food and is not doing anything good for you. Okay. Let's do this with like a really safe electrolyte that doesn't have any sugar or food colorings in it. And it's got a good amount of sodium to really help you go in, but stay away from the ramen for this. You also want to stay away from a couple of different liquids. The first one is caffeine. Caffeine is a stimulant that works on the central nervous system, but it can actually elevate your cortisol levels. So if you aren't having adrenal problems, then 16 ounces of coffee, which is about 2 measuring cups a day, is fine. I do recommend drinking coffee with food because if you drink it without food, it raises your insulin levels, which we'll be talking about in a future episode. And that's not good for your hormones either. So, coffee, just kind of be careful with that. Emerging evidence is suggesting that there's a relation between like circadian rhythm and alcohol metabolism. So, alcohol has been shown to disrupt that circadian rhythm and also allow cortisol levels to go up. So, again, not saying you don't drink alcohol, just be really careful with your alcohol, especially if your cortisol levels are already up. And a lot of us, we get stressed, we want to drink, right? So, think about that. By the time I see clients, they're usually at the point where we have to use a supplement to help them get their adrenal glands back functioning well. The good news is it really takes a short amount of time. Typically, I say give me 1 week and we'll get your energy back. Now, you have to be on the supplement usually about a month, but in a week, you start noticing a difference. So that's what's really great. However, I am really careful when I'm suggesting supplements, and I won't be doing that much on the podcast. And the reason is particularly with adrenal supplements, they can actually mess with high blood pressure. So if you have high blood pressure, you want to be really careful with adrenal supplements, and you want to make sure to get one that does not have licorice in it. Licorice is in a lot of adrenal supplements, and it can actually raise your blood pressure. If you don't have blood pressure issues, that shouldn't be an issue. But as always, check with your doctor before you make any changes to your supplements. Now, for safety reasons, again, I'm not going to be recommending these supplements. So just keep that in mind. If you're in one of my programs, then I certainly can do that for you. Now, lifestyle changes are crucial for taking care of these adrenal fatigues. Because chronic stress is often the problem, it's important to find healthy ways to take care of that stress. And believe me, this is the hardest thing for me to do. So many stress management techniques can include like reducing stress, lowering cortisol levels. There's like meditation, mindfulness, breathing exercises. I like to say every time you go to the bathroom, make sure you take 3 deep breaths. Okay. I know that seems strange, but that's something we do every day, right? We all go pee all the time. So go and take those deep breaths. It's going to just help us remember us to center ourselves back to help with stress. Maybe we don't have stress at that moment, but it will help. And by the way, when you take 3 deep breaths, it actually tells your cortisol to quit pumping out, which is a good thing. It helps really to level everything out. Something else that I need to get back into is yoga. I actually have a list on my desk here. I have been a little injured, so I have gotten away from my yoga, but I want to get back into it because for me, movement is also helpful. So I like to exercise every morning. I'll go for a walk. Now that my injuries are a little bit better, I'll be at the gym. But any of these things that can help with stress management, I have to use them all. Getting out in nature is something else I do. The research on it is phenomenal. In Japan, they actually give you prescriptions to get out in nature. They call it forest bathing. So definitely that is a way to lower down your cortisol levels. Prioritizing sleep. So not only do you want to go to bed by 10 o'clock every night, but whatever time you go to bed, you want to be that consistent bedtime. So say 9 o'clock is when you'd like to go to bed. Go to bed not every night at 9 o'clock because that helps your circadian rhythm really get where it needs to be. Something else that's really helpful is when you wake up in the morning, go outside and look at the sun for a few minutes. Maybe take your tea out there. It really helps. There's actually receptors in our eyes that tell us to look for this sun so it knows where we're at in the circadian rhythm. So getting out in the sun during the day actually help you sleep better at night. The best time to do it is in the morning, but bonus tips, go out midday and right before you go to bed too, and that really helps. We already talked about exercise. That is so, so important. So this is the adrenals and cortisol. Adrenals produce the cortisol. They're the organ that produce the cortisol. They are the bottom line when it comes to our hormone hierarchy. If cortisol, the adrenals are not balanced, nothing else can be balanced. Okay. So this is the first step. Next week, we'll be talking about insulin and how that relates into the thyroid and all our hormones as well. So thanks for listening to Hormone Heaven. Please subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you can get the podcast as soon as they are available. If you have questions, please go to alternativehealthwithangel.com or check out the show notes in the link description below. And remember, do not make any changes with medications or supplements without speaking to your healthcare provider. These statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. This is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent disease.